Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. There are two epiphanies that one can have that can change the course of your life. The first is the realization that thinking and dreaming big is just as easy and costs nothing more than thinking small, so why not always think big? The second is that time is limited. We all work roughly 12 hours per day, so if you're going to put in the same amount of time and effort no matter what, why not work on something big and something bold that has the potential to change the world? Well, a gentleman that I've come to know as a good friend over the past year has dedicated his life to living this mindset, and he is truly changing the world as a result. In 1994, Dr. Peter Diamandis founded the X Prize Foundation. Now, the X Prize was created to offer a $10 million competition intended to inspire a new generation of private passenger-carrying spaceships. Now, the prize was announced on May 18th, 1996 in St. Louis, Missouri, without any purse money available or any teams. It took nearly a decade, but eventually Peter finally put together the money, put together the prize, and gathered 26 teams to compete in the contest, which took place on September 29th, 2004. Now, the prize was ultimately won by Spaceship One when it became the first vehicle in history to successfully complete a manned spaceflight on a privately built spaceship. So it is safe to say that Peter was directly responsible. He was the person that brought humanity's dreams of private spaceflight into reality. This is an extremely important interview with someone that I find incredibly inspiring, and it certainly has the potential to change the course of your life. So please help me welcome Dr. Peter Diamandis. This week's recommended resource is baremetrics.com. That is spelled B-A-R-E metrics.com. If you have a product or service with some kind of monthly subscription, Baremetrics is an incredibly easy-to-use dashboard that will provide you with all of the important pieces of data that you need, such as lifetime customer value and churn rates. I use it for Self-Made Man Society, and it is a fantastic tool that you will absolutely love. Welcome back, everybody. Mike Dillard here, and today we are joined by a gentleman who continues to inspire me and has for years on his vision for the world, on abundance, on boldness, the one and only Dr. Peter Diamandis. So, Peter, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to finally have you on here.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been way too long coming.
Absolutely. So you've got a lot going on right now, and today really the topic that you and I decided to tackle for the episode, was really how do you go big as an entrepreneur? How do you create wealth and impact the world at the same time? And this has been a theme of mine and a focus of mine for the last couple of years, but it's been awesome to watch you really live this through your ventures and through X Prize specifically. But for those of our audience members who may be hearing of you for the first time, if you could, let's spend 5 or 10 minutes to go through your story at a high level and bring everybody up to speed.
Happily. So I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 18 companies, mostly in the space, outer space, and high-tech world. Spent a couple of dozen years at school getting a 6-pack of degrees, had a medical degree, aerospace engineering, graduate degree, molecular biology, undergraduate, and then went on to start 2 universities, the International Space University, which is the leading space university in Strasbourg, France. And then I co-founded Singularity University, which is based in Silicon Valley, co-founded that with Ray Kurzweil, and that's a university that focuses on exponential technologies, computers, sensors, networks, AI, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology, AR, VR, and how these technologies are really giving entrepreneurs incredible power to take on the world's biggest problems. In the space world, asteroid mining through a company called Planetary Resources. In the health world, 2 incredibly fun companies, Human Longevity, which is the world's largest genome sequencing company, and a company that's going to be rolled out in the next 45 days called Cellularity, which is in the stem cell world.
So a few years ago, you wrote a book that was absolutely huge called Abundance. And to wrap it up, as far as my view or context of it was, we tend to get bombarded with negative news all the time, and the world is falling apart. And it could lead to a very dim view. And the purpose of the book was actually to bring to light the fact that the opposite is taking place.
Yeah, I love that, right? We are, as you said, bombarded by the news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you think about the goal of the news media, they're a business, and their business is to deliver your eyeballs to their advertisers. And it turns out that as humans, we pay 10 times more attention to negative news than positive news. Just the scary headlines, the negative headlines, all those things capture our attention. And that's for a very specific reason. We evolutionarily were advantaged to pay attention to negative news because it would save our lives 100,000 years ago or a million years ago, when we'd see a squiggle on the ground and think snake instead of stick. And for that reason, the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, is so true. But when you actually look at the data, which I do in the book and I do when I lecture around the world in Fortune 500 boardrooms, wherever it might be, the data is overwhelmingly in the opposite direction. We are living in the most peaceful world we've ever had. Hard to believe, but if you look at the data, our chance of dying a violent death are 1/500th of what they used to be. We're at a low across the board in all kinds of violent rape, of violence against children, of all kinds of different areas, and it's extraordinary that people don't know this. And the reason is that we, today have brought into our living rooms in vivid color, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every piece of negative news on the planet over and over and over again, because we have cell phones, we have coverage. This stuff used to go on. There are marauding troops of tribes crossing throughout Europe or Americas back 100, 200 years ago that we didn't know about. And so we think of every small terrorist activity as just the world is coming to an end. And on the whole, it's not.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable to watch. And I think your book came at a perfect time. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, but right after the big crash of '08, years after that. And it's a message the world needed to hear, and entrepreneurs specifically. And one other piece of your history that I think is vital to cover before we dive into what you're working on these days is the fact that you are very much, in my mind at least, directly responsible for the fact that we now have private spaceflight through X Prize and the original inspiration for that. Could you take 5 minutes to review that story, if you will, and bring people up to speed on that?
Yeah, sure. So I became impassioned about space as a child. It was Apollo and it was Star Trek that got me going. Apollo showed where we were and what we were doing, and Star Trek where we could go. And then when NASA didn't actually deliver on that long-term vision, when the space program fell off the cliff and we never went back to the moon, we never went on to Mars, I became disenfranchised and said, okay, I'm going to pursue this commercially. And long story short, in 1996, I launched a $10 million prize called the X Prize, funded by an amazing family, the Ansari family, that put up the capital. We had 26 teams around the world who spent $100 million going after this $10 million prize. And the prize was for the first team who could build a private spaceship, carry 3 adults, go to space, land safely, and within 2 weeks make the trip again. It was really modeled after the Orteig Prize that Lindbergh won in 1927. Well, the prize was won in 2004, and Richard Branson came in and bought the rights from Burt Rutan and Paul Allen to create Virgin Galactic. Many of the people in the background there, Jeff Bezos, who I've known for the better part of 30 years, and Elon Musk for the last 15, 16 years, really, I think, took the ball forward another order of magnitude or two. And today we have a vibrant space program. I think it's the first trillionaires we made in space, but that's, again, another story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a huge audience of entrepreneurs listening to this right now. The world is changing at an unbelievably quickening pace. I'm 39 years old, and I've even started to feel this, my age, if you will, unfamiliar with the new tech that's coming out, and having to really consciously go out and pursue education around it, figure out how it works, figure out the opportunities that this new tech is creating. let's talk about the future and the entrepreneur's role in the next 10 to 20 years to come.
Yeah, I think it's the most exciting time ever to be alive and the best time ever to be an entrepreneur. You have in your hands as an entrepreneur, as a single individual entrepreneur, you have access to more knowledge and information than the best companies the President of the United States had just, 20, 25 years ago. You have access to more computational power on the cloud through Amazon Web Servers. You have access to more capital through crowdfunding, through angel funds, through all kinds of things than ever before. There's no reason that you as an entrepreneur are not pursuing your grandest dreams other than you're, not feeling confident in yourself or not willing to give it a shot. But the boundaries and the barriers have fallen precipitously. Every year, I run an event called Abundance 360. I made it, interestingly enough, a very fun commitment. I committed to run an event every year for 25 years. And I do this in LA at in Beverly Hills for 300 CEOs, entrepreneurs that pay a significant amount of money. It's $12,500 for 3 days. But for 3 days, I'm on stage sharing with that group at Abundance 360, the name of the event. I'm sharing with that group what's going from deceptive to disruptive this year. Literally, what are the technologies that you need to know about? And my goal is to help entrepreneurs not be fearful about the future, but be excited by it. This is the stuff you need to know about. This is the stuff you need to be tracking. This is how it's going to change your business, other businesses. This is how things are going to be disrupted. And we have those exact conversations really so folks can plan out their year or decide what tech they're going to be investing in. But being an entrepreneur today is significantly different than it's ever been. The tools you have, the technology you have access to, the way you need to be thinking. And for me, mindset is one of the most important elements. So that's the stuff I do. And I prep for Abundance 360 by doing a review, a year in review of 2016 of what were the science and tech breakthroughs in the last 12 calendar months. And I review everything. And then I put it together in a briefing for the group. And this year, I palpably felt the acceleration coming on strong. And it's extraordinarily exciting. And I think it's just going to continue as a sizable rate.
So I would love to dive into that, specifically your mindset. When I look out at the world today, I try to do it from a fairly neutral standpoint. I see all of the good, all of the amazing stuff coming down the pipe. And I also look at the things that I would consider the negatives or the challenges or the roadblocks or whatever it may be. And, I had an opportunity to spend 3 days with your team at the X Prize Visioneers Summit here a couple of months ago. And it was just unbelievable to where it's like, at least my perception was, you have just this kind of tunnel vision on prosperity and abundance and the positive side of this equation. Is that actually accurate? And if so, how do you think about the world? Because I think the thoughts that you think are obviously creating the reality that you live in, and that's something that we all have to take conscious control of.
Yeah, I do believe in this incredible world of prosperity and abundance, and I teach this, right? And later, I'll mention the program I'm doing with Success Partners called Exponential Advantage. And the very first thing I open up with is an exponential mindset conversation and a abundance mindset conversation, because I think these are critically important. And we as humans have these cognitive biases. Our brain cannot handle the amount of information we get. And by the way, our brains were designed for the world 100,000 years ago to 3 million years ago. That's when our neocortex of our brain evolved. That's when the neuronal structures of our brain, the shortcuts our brain takes, was from a world long ago when the world was local and linear. Everything that affected you was in a day's walk. Everything was linear. Things didn't change decade to decade, century to century. They didn't even change millennium to millennium. It was pretty much constant. So even then, the amount of visual, auditory, tactile information we had coming in was more than we could handle. And we created these shortcuts. And these shortcuts would make our life easier. But today, as we have all this negative news coming in, or all this information coming in, these shortcuts do us a disservice. So for example, when I talk about, the news coming in from the crisis news network, what I call CNN, or the constantly negative news network, it's not like the news isn't true. It's just not a balanced view, right? Because all we hear about, because of their job of delivering your eyeballs to advertisers, is the negative news. So we don't have a news reporter in front of LAX a few miles from here saying there was no airplane crash here today. No one at the local school saying no school shooting here today. So you differentially get only negative news. And when you get this, you just view it as the world is coming to an end, because now we have, close to 7 billion connected people in some form of connection. So we get every piece of story bombarding us. So what do you do about that? What I talk about is, first of all, not watching the produced news. I don't. I get back hours, dozens of hours a week by not doing that. I get my news through news filters. I set up filters for the things that are important to my business, to my life. My social media will give me certain news that I think is valuable, depending on where I'm getting it from. And so it's not allowing the outside world to shape my mindset. Because you think the world is going to hell in a handbasket, you'll be scared. You'll be a scarcity mindset. You're not going to invest. You're not going to move forward. You're going to be very constrained and restrained in what you do. If you think, in fact, the world is getting better, then you're going to focus on prosperity. You're going to focus on abundance. I mean, when my last book, Bold, I interviewed about, it was 6 different billionaires: Elon Musk, Larry Page, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, just a few. And all of them have this abundance mindset. The world is getting better at an extraordinary rate. And because of that, they're investing on that curve of incredible growth. So I've realized also, Mike, that whatever used to be scarce is becoming abundant over and over again. Technology is the force that takes scarcity into abundance. Let's use an example here. I think about the fact that aluminum used to be the most scarce metal on the planet until we came up with a process of electrolysis that made it now the cheapest metal on the planet. I'll go into the details, but I cover that story in my book, Abundance. A more recent example is a friend of mine has a company I advise called the Diamond Foundry, and they've built machines about the size of a refrigerator that have methane, water, and electricity come in one end, and out the other end comes perfect diamonds. Would you like 2 carats, 3 carats, 5 carats, 8 carats? What would you like? Would you like imperfections or color? You can add that. And who would have thought of anything more scarce than a perfect diamond? It used to be that access to massive amounts of information, you'd have to hire an incredible consulting team that would go to the libraries, go and do research. Now it's free on Google. So the things over and over again that we think of as scarce and extremely valuable, technology makes more and more abundant in almost every single measure.
So from an entrepreneur's perspective, an exponential advantage, let's dive into that and how they can tap into all of the changes taking place and create some awesome, amazing, technology and businesses that can have a massively positive impact on the world.
So, it's an interesting question of what business do you want to go into and how does technology impact it? I am very proud to be co-founder with Ray Kurzweil of Singularity University. And we have about 6,000 to 8,000 graduate school entrepreneurs applying for SU every year. And Google funds all the scholarships. We accept about 90. We also have global competitions, our global impact competitions around the world to get a slot at SU. And at SU every year, the students start about 15 to 20 startups. And the goal of their startup is to positively impact the world, the lives of 1 billion people in 10 years. And anybody who's listening, I encourage you to consider going to SU. If you go to su.org is the URL, or singularityU.org. Anyway, I teach there a lot because I love meeting the students. And I have 2 mantras I teach. One is that if you want to become a billionaire, help 1 billion people. It's it's this beautiful alignment. The more people you help, the more wealth you create. And the second is that the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities, right? if you go searching for really juicy, huge problems, there are amazing business opportunities that you can take on. And so in my book, my last book, Bold, I talk about this, and I encourage people again within their mindset, and this is part of what I'm teaching with success partners, is what is your MTP and what is your moonshot? Let's talk about those two elements of a mindset because I think they're really important. So first of all, an MTP is a massively transformative purpose. And I propose that every single individual listening to this should either have an MTP or make it their number one objective to figure out their MTP, to find out what is your massively transformative purpose. Why are you here on earth? What is it that wakes you up in the morning, excited for the day? What is it that steals your shower time? What is it that's going to keep you going till 3 o'clock in the morning? What is it that's fun for you to do in life? And that when people say it can't be done, you say, bullshit, I can do it. Because if you have an MTP, it is the fuel, the emotional energy that will drive you against all the odds to succeed. And when I talk about MTPs, massively transformative purposes, it's for individuals. It's also for companies. I think every single company should have an MTP. An MTP isn't to create greater shareholder value, yada, yada, yada. MTP is something like for X Prize, it is to solve humanity's grandest challenges. And for SU, it's to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people. For Google, it's to organize the world's information. It is something that is, captures the heart and the mind. It captures the heart inspirationally. It captures the mind as a challenge of how would I do that. For me, I'll share my MTP. It's to inspire and guide the transformation of humanity on and off the earth. I think the human race is going to go through a significant cultural and species-wide transformation over the next 20 to 30 years. And my purpose, my mission in life is to inspire that and to guide it both on and off the earth. And that drives every morning I open up with a focus on that. Every night I end with a focus on that. And it drives the things that I do. So MTP is the first thing. What is your MTP? How do you get an MTP? How does it influence your life? We can talk more about that later. I know I spend a lot of time teaching that. The other part is, what is your moonshot? So within the realm of your MTP, and MTP is mindset, right? It's clear, it's front and center. You do what you focus on. And the other question is, what is your moonshot? So all of us in our businesses are plodding along, and we're doing the best that we can, and we typically get stuck in a rut. And that rut is that what we've been doing works, it's going reasonably well, it's comfortable. And I'm, constantly reminding CEOs, listen, if you don't disrupt yourself, someone else will. You can never be fulfilled and happy with what you have. I mean, you can be, and of course you should be. The world is not about just work, work, work. It should be about happiness. But the game that I like to play is, how would I disrupt myself? And so I set unreasonable moonshots at, I just went through this process at the beginning of this year for my companies. And I say, okay, what is my moonshot for 5 years from now? And then I define a moonshot from the way that Larry Page at Google and Astrid Teller, the captain of moonshots who heads Google X, defines it as going 10 times bigger where the rest of the world is going 10% bigger. It's 100x difference. So where in your organization could you go 100x bigger? What is your moonshot? And it's not critically important at the beginning, how you're going to do it. But if you can target and measure what that moonshot is, if you can clearly define the moonshot looks like this, and if you pound on it, you can eventually make it happen. I can't help but remind people that the technologies we have in our hands today are magic compared to what existed 10 years ago, right? You can speak and get information flowing from your Amazon Echo. I have a Model S and a Model X that drive themselves around most of the time. Just the kinds of technology we have, and it's accelerating. In 5 years' time, we're probably going to have this massive increase of technological capability that will dwarf the last 20 years.
Listening to this, Peter, it gets you excited, it gets you motivated, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are thinking like, do I have what it takes to do that? And I've learned a lot of lessons specifically around this with my endeavors over the last 2 years. Can you give some words of wisdom or share some of your experiences specifically when it came to the challenges you went through when you launched XPRIZE, on the fact that a moonshot's not going to be easy. You're probably not going to get it right the first time, but, stick with it. And I think people look at someone like yourself or the success I've had in my industry, and they're like, oh, well, they just had whatever it took and it just came to them naturally and easily. And I don't have what it takes. But I think your story has a lot of wisdom in there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike, and point. And I think that if I could give any piece of advice, it's the realization that doing anything big and bold in the world is hard. And that's why it needs to tap into your MTP, your massively transformative purpose, because the majority, 99.999% of the people, are going to give up when it gets that hard. And if you're tapped into your purpose, you're going to keep going. And I like to joke and say a lot of my companies are overnight successes after 10 or 11 years of hard work. Now, the question is, when do you give up because it's a stupid idea and you're wasting your time? Or when do you not give up and do you keep going? Right? I mean, it's a really important question. And you and I have talked about this as well. And I think it really comes into clarity when you are sure about what your MTP is. If you know your MTP, and my MTP around the XPRIZE originally was, making space available to the general public. It was everything for me. I was so pissed off that NASA had not gone beyond the moon and had shut down the Apollo program and all of its future-looking programs back in the early 70s. And I had given up on the government as the means to go into space. And I started looking at all kinds of different ways. And one day I read Lindbergh's book and learned that in 1919, a Frenchman named Raymond Ortegue, who was a New York hotelier, had offered up a $25,000 prize for the first person to fly nonstop between New York and Paris, which was considered a crazy idea. And that $25,000 prize 8 years later in 1927 had inspired $400,000 of expenditures, 16 times the prize money by 9 different teams. And the most unlikely guy to pull it off was Lindbergh, who won the competition. So I think about that, 8-year journey of Ortegue. I think of the fact that the XPRIZE got launched I came up with the idea in 1994, was launched in 96. It was won in 2004, again, another 10-year journey there. And I had so many people, countless people, tell me it was a stupid idea. Give up. It's not going to work. I also, along the way, I didn't have $10 million when I announced the prize. I announced it without having the capital in hand, which is a long story. Julian Guthrie just wrote an amazing book, my biography and the story of the XPRIZE, called How to Make a Spaceship. It was a New York Times bestseller, forward by Richard Branson, the afterword by Stephen Hawking. Very proud of the book, and it tells the full detailed account. But along the way, I pitched 150 people on funding the $10 million. I was told no over and over and over and over. My parents, my friends were telling me, what are you doing? Give up. This is, why are you wasting your time? And the fact is, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I did give up. But because it was bullseye in my MTP and the energy was there to renew that every day. So, if you get out there with your MTP, you will call to your tribe that wants to support you and the tools. And, it doesn't guarantee success. Of the 18 companies, I've had a third of them have failed outright. A third have been successes, and a third are, still to be written. But all I can say is moonshots are a muscle. They take practice. And they don't happen in one fell swoop. You don't go from 0 to infinity, right? The fact that I can be focused on an asteroid mining company, Planetary Resources, or Human Longevity, largest genome sequencing company, is only a result of the multitude of companies and failures and trials and relationships and everything I built over the previous 30 years. So, if you're listening to this and you're 22, when I was 22, what I was doing for my moonshot was, running a big conference and organizing that and things like that were within my reach, but were a stretch.
It's been unbelievable to watch how your career has evolved. And, one of the things that had the biggest impact on me attending the Visioneer Summit is, there was a group of 200, 300 people there. And I easily felt like I was the most ignorant person at the entire event, which was awesome. Well, it was the best part about it. I was like, I'm surrounded by some of the absolute most inspiring and intelligent people on the planet. And you cannot help but look at the world differently and to think bigger and to dream bigger. And it was absolutely awesome. If there's a methodology to it other than living your day-to-day life and your MTP for the last 10, 20 years, how did you surround yourself with such an amazing group of people?
That's a great question. One of the old sayings is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I believe that when you think about going big, creating wealth, impacting the world, which it's part of what I focus on and part of what I believe everybody should be focusing on. When I say going big, I mean really, stretching your abilities, stretching what you mean for on this planet. It could be going big philanthropically. It could be going big on helping people, on building business, whatever you want. I think, creating wealth. Wealth is a form of energy that you can use to do bigger and better things with. It's, you can't take it with you. You should spend it and use it to impact the world while you're here. And I think all of us, it's important for us to leave the world in a much better place than we found it. And that adage, I think, is fundamentally true. I'm an optimist when it comes even to humanity. And I look for people like that. And I am lucky to have those kinds of people with me at X Prize, at Singularity University, in my companies. And I think ultimately to do anything big and bold requires a great team and a great mindset and culture for your organization. Those are the most important things. Technology comes third after those. So, I've done it by just being vocal, by putting out there, and also by actually, I like to say the ratio of something to nothing is infinite. And so doing something, stop talking about it and go out there, goddammit, and do something. I don't care how small it is. Do something. Have your friends and colleagues witness it, and then stretch your goal and do the next thing and accomplish it, and then stretch your goal and do the next thing. If you fail, then try again and do something. You can. And that's the most important thing. Start now.
That is the absolute perfect segue to my next question, which was, okay, someone might have their vision, their purpose aligned, and they don't know where to start from a practicality, from a practical standpoint. Okay, what do I actually do to get this ball rolling? What is the first, piece of action that I need to take? And is that what's going to be covered in Exponential Advantage? What's the purpose of the program? But how does someone actually take that step and get started?
So let me answer both. The first thing that I recommend is getting in tune with your passion and purpose. And, part of what I teach in Exponential Advantage, when I teach at Singularity University to my graduate students there, and it's like lesson number 1 is really a focus on passion and purpose. What did you want to do as a child? Before your parents and school teachers and society told you had to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or whatever it is, what did you want to do? Honestly, because I know amazing people who played video games and made hundreds of millions of dollars in video game development. What did you want to do? The second way that you can explore your purpose and passion is if I gave you $1 billion and said, Mike, change the world with this. Don't spend yourself. I want you to go do something that fundamentally would change the world, be extraordinary. What would you do with $1 billion? So I'm trying to give you in just a couple of examples of handles upon which to figure that out. The second thing is it's really hard to have these kinds of conversations on your own, just to sort of sit in a room and talk into a mirror. So it's important to find individuals in your tribe, in your community, through social media, through events. I know an exponential advantage, one of the most important elements is the private Facebook group that we create of entrepreneurs working through this process together, or at SU or wherever it might be, and finding people to have these conversations with that share common interests. Everything I've ever done, every company I've ever created has been in partnership with a co-founder or a few co-founders. And when I'm down, they're up. When they're up, when they're down, I'm up. And it's just, this conversation you can have. I've also had a lot of progress when I've had conversations with authors reading a book, Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near, Charles Lindbergh's The Spirit of St. Louis, Robert Heinlein's The Man Who Sold the Moon. These were books that caused me to start companies. And maybe How to Make a Spaceship or Abundance or Bold would be that for some people. So I think it's creating clarity on your mission and purpose, finding a group to have conversations with. And again, these are things that I cover in Exponential Advantage, but then it is looking at things such as understanding where technology is today and where is it going over the next 2 to 5 years, maybe 10 at the outmost, because we're in such an extraordinary rate of change that the power of an entrepreneur is growing at phenomenal rates. I remember back in 2000 when I started a company, I was CEO of an Idea Lab company. Bill Gross had just raised $1 billion from Steven Spielberg and others and asked me to run a company called Blastoff to go to the moon. And it was an incredible effort of technology. But I remember we had a lot of internet components. It was a $5 million of the internet side of the company for the bandwidth, for the servers, for the software, for the people. Today, you can start an internet company not for $5 million, but for like $5,000, using open source, using AWS, using all kinds of online resources. So the cost of startup has dropped precipitously. And then the most important thing then is experimentation. So again, a lot of things here. What I do at Exponential Advantage is it's 8 one-hour modules that are all divided into pieces. The first part is a focus on exponentials and exponential mindset, helping people understand what is exponential technologies, how is it different than what existed before, how does it impact the way we think, how is it, is it go on forever? Then I do a module on abundance mindset and what does that mean, and how do you stop thinking about scarcity-based companies and thinking about abundance-minded efforts. I mean, that's what Elon Musk did with Solar City and Tesla. He realized that, as predominant as natural gas and coal and oil was, that there's 8,000 times more energy that hits the earth from the sun than we consume as a species. And there's a squanderable abundance of solar energy. And he is basically out there to completely reverse the energy pyramid. And, for the first year ever, last year, the cost of solar was below the cost of coal. And I think those days are very numbered. I talk about AI in a very understandable fashion, networks and sensors that are changing our world. We're about to have 8 billion people connected. Those 8 billion people are going to need insurance and banking and information, all kinds of services, right? We're at about 3 billion connected today. So that means 5 billion new consumers have never been heard of before. So what product or service are you going to offer 5 billion people just coming online? Talk about VR and AR, virtual and augmented reality, synthetic biology, robotics, 3D printing and digital manufacturing. So all of these exponential technologies that are powerful technologies for the entrepreneur. And guess what? You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be a programmer to get this stuff. There are lots of engineers. There's lots of programmers out there. What you need to do is be the connector. You need to be the person who understands the problem, the product, the service, what people want. Maybe you're the best storyteller. Maybe you're the best fundraiser. you can tap into amazing people who are doing machine learning and amazing people doing 3D printing, and you can, pull them in a crowdsourcing fashion as your resource. But God knows you don't have to actually build a 3D printer yourself or write the algorithms yourself. There are people who can do that. So I go on, I talk about crowdfunding, crowd resources. I talk about creating your MTP, creating your moonshots, go on to really how to launch a company during these exponential times. And it's really, for me, my mission is helping entrepreneurs. And if I can help 1 million entrepreneurs get started and play a bigger game in the world, help impact 1 billion people, it makes the world a much more abundant and a better place. It's my lever for changing the world and solving problems.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough that the single most important suggestion that I can make for everybody is to go get plugged into this ecosystem and this group of people specifically that Peter has really become the epicenter of in many, many ways through X Prize and through what he's doing here. If you're not surrounded by individuals who are thinking the same way and who are looking and open to the same opportunities, you're not even in the game. Like you're on a different planet, and you're just going to get left behind. So the single biggest piece of advice I could give everyone listening to this is to plug into this message, plug into this vision for the future, and to Peter and his resources. Join Abundance 360, which I did. I was at the very first event you did 2 years ago, which was awesome. The Visioneers event, just plugging into the group that you have built in the community alone shifts your mindset in a way that you look at the world in a very, very different way. And the opportunities that are presented because of that are the kind that you're talking about.
And I appreciate that. It's I love connecting people. It is one of my joys. I have been blessed and so grateful for the people who helped me. I was just on the phone this morning at some length with Tony Robbins. He's going to be, the A360 this year is going to be awesome. And Abundance 360, one of the modules I'm doing it with Tony Robbins and Steve Jurvetson. Steve is probably the number one venture capitalist in tech. He's on the board of Tesla. He's on the board of SpaceX, of Synthetic Genomics, an amazing guy. And Steve and Tony and I are talking about what is not going to change in 25 years. All right. So I'm constantly at all the things that are changing, that are, going crazy and are moving, but understanding what's not going to change in 25 years is another set of tools that's important. So it's fun, and I appreciate it, Mike. Let me share one other nugget from Exponential Advantage and Bull that I think is a really important way to think about the world for entrepreneurs and places that you as an entrepreneur can come up with ideas for businesses that are valuable. And again, excuse me for rushing on this, but I teach about what I call the 6 Ds of exponential impact, the 6 Ds. And the first D is that whatever becomes digitized goes from, pen and paper to ones and zeros on a computer. And right now that means everything: biology, medicine, finance, manufacturing with 3D printing is becoming digitized. It enters a period of deceptive, slow growth, and it then becomes disruptive, and then it dematerializes, demonetizes, and democratizes products and services and industries. And the example here is, if I asked everyone listening here, how many of you had heard about 3D printing? I think everybody at this point will have raised their hands. And I usually will say, how many heard of it 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And I remember hearing that about 20 years ago, but the reality is it's a 33-year-old technology that a guy named Chuck Hull, who is the founder of 3D Systems, created, stereolithography. And it's just been in deceptive growth, growing very slowly. I opened my last book, Bold, with the story of the digital camera that was created in 1976 by a guy named Steven Sasson. And the digital camera took 0.01 megapixel images, right? I mean, like nothing. And Kodak ignored this deceptively simple digital camera. But the next year it did 0.02 and 0.04 and 0.08. And when you're growing on an exponential growth curve, even when it's small numbers and it's deceptive, eventually it breaks the knee of the curve and it goes, today we have 10 megapixel images, and Kodak filed for, chapter 11, disrupted by the very technology that they had created. And then, when you go from deceptive to disruptive, you then dematerialize. So on my cell phone today, I don't have a GPS in my car. That GPS is an app on my phone, as is a digital camera, as is a digital video camera, as are video 2A conferencing, as are libraries of books. And so the digital exponential revolution is dematerializing. It's taking physical things that we used to have to go and buy and making them bits on our phone. And the phone will dematerialize soon enough. We can talk about that some other time. But when they dematerialize, the incremental cost of creating your dematerialized GPS software is effectively zero, and your cost of transmitting it is zero. And so these dematerialized products and services then demonetize products and services. So Uber is demonetizing car transportation, Airbnb hotels, right? Craigslist demonetized the classified ads. And then when you dematerialize and demonetize, you democratize things. They go from a service in your local city or town to a global service very quickly. So I ask entrepreneurs, look at a profitable product or service that a large company is doing and figure out how can you dematerialize it and demonetize it, and do it before someone else does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the inspiration behind my hydroponics venture. So,
yeah. And then someone can turn around and do it to you and figure out how to dematerialize and demonetize it. And so it's a constant game of constantly reinventing and dematerializing and demonetizing products and services. And this, by the way, is not slowing down, which leads me to really have great faith that the cost of living is dropping precipitously. Pretty soon, a dear friend of mine, Jeff Holden, who's an A360 member, who's going to be speaking this year on autonomous cars. The prediction is that we'll have autonomous Ubers very quickly in the next couple of years. We have them in Philadelphia right now. There's a person behind the wheel, but an autonomous electric Uber is going to be 5 to 8 times cheaper than owning a car, which means the poorest people on the planet are being chauffeured around. The best education, the best healthcare will be delivered by AIs that will be effectively free. So the things that we spend money on are going very rapidly towards zero.
I know we've got just a couple minutes left. A final devil's advocate question for you here. We have technology increasing at an exponential level, yet we have the brain that is not evolving at an exponential level. Does the future look like really smart AI that is taking care of the primitive people and keeping them comfortable? Or is there a way that we can actually keep up from a cognitive standpoint with the future?
It's a great question. A dear friend of mine, Brian Johnson, Brian just did an exit to eBay for $800 million and committed $100 million plus to a new company called Kernel. And he says it's not about humans versus AI. It's about HI. It's about increasing human intelligence. And Ray Kurzweil, my co-founder and the chancellor of Singularity University, talks about this as one of his predictions for the early 2030s. Just time check, we're in 2017 here. Early 2030s is 15 years away, not far from now. And Ray's prediction is that we're going to be plugging the brain into the cloud. And so that, in our brain today, we have some 300 million pattern recognizers. Each of these is about 100 neurons each, and they store memories, information, and patterns. And when you use them, you've used them. And you have to reuse them and reprogram. And then, what we do is we don't memorize phone numbers anymore. We let that be in our cell phone. But imagine a near future in the next 15 years where you're able to plug your brain into the cloud. Think of it as Google on the cloud. That's something that's coming ferociously, rapidly towards us. And there are a number of players looking at that and thinking about that. In the interim, we're going to have AI assistants. You're going to have AIs that you give permission to listen to your conversations, read what you read, listen to what you listen to, scan your DNA, look at the foods you eat, all of those things, because it's running massive parallel computation and giving you the information you need even before you know you need it. And so that's going to help us filter the amount of information we're getting. The fact is that the only constant is change, and the rate of change is increasing. So I do believe that we are undergoing, as I mentioned earlier, from my MTP, a transformation. We are merging with technology. We are sort of the parents of a new form of technology, and we're going to be merging with that. Not everyone wants to, needs to. That's fine. But the world around us is changing, and it's happening during our lifetime. One other subject I'll just mention rapidly in passing is that we're on the verge of significantly extending the healthy human lifespan. That we have the ability to, I think, in the next 10 years, next decade, add 30 to 40 healthy years on everyone's life, and then add AI and genomic sequencing and stem cell science on top of that, and we may be able to live as long as we want to. These are crazy ideas. I completely get that. But they're crazy ideas that billions of dollars are flowing into and are becoming more and more handleable, crackable, usable, pursuable with every improvement in technology that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an unbelievable time to be alive. And man, it's kind of like living in a dream.
It is. It is.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And for everybody listening, if you would like to learn directly from Peter on how to come up with a business idea that could serve a billion people, how to tap into the technology and the trends that are taking place right now, go participate in the program that's starting, this next week, Exponential Advantage.
Agreed.
And you can do that at diamandisadvantage.com. I'm going to send out some links via email to you guys as well. This is something that I will be participating in. And Peter, where can people go to connect with you personally and to tap in to your message and, XPRIZE and everything you're doing?
Yeah, if you just go to diamandis.com, it's my website. I put out a blog every week, every Sunday that I write myself, that I spend a lot of time thinking on about what is critically important that needs to be known about. I make it as consumable, actionable, and user-friendly, and read it in your coffee line. I also scan through the news media every week from the technology standpoint, and I put out something called Abundance Insider on Fridays, which are the 8 top technology articles you need to know about, and I make them in a very consumable form. It's like what it is for a sentence or two and why it's important, and then a link to the article if you want. But my goal is that if you read Abundance Insider and you consume my blog, that I will keep you on top of this incredible world we're in. xprize.org is if you want to learn about the X Prizes we're running. SingularityU.org if you're interested in becoming a Singularity University executive. We run a 7-day executive program. We run a 9-week graduate program as well. So it is an exciting time to be alive, the most ever. Dive in, have fun, go big, impact the world, and let's create a world of abundance.
Awesome. Peter, thank you. Thank you all for listening so much, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Everything changes.
Life.